Captain Kim Tae-ho watched the stars blur past his ship's window as they traveled faster than light for the first time in human history. His heart pounded with excitement and fear. Earth had finally built a ship that could reach other star systems. The mission was simple: explore, learn, and come back home safely. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Dr. Park Soo-jin from her station. She was the team's scientist, chosen because she knew more about alien life than anyone on Earth. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as data filled her screen. "What kind of strange?" Kim asked, moving closer to look. "Energy readings unlike anything we've seen before. Very powerful. Very organized. I think we've found what we came looking for." Kim felt his stomach tighten. They had hoped to find signs of alien life. But now that it was happening, he wondered if Earth was ready for contact. The ship's crew of 12 had trained for years, but training and reality were different things. The strange signals grew stronger. Soon, massive shapes appeared on their screens. Ships, hundreds of them, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. The alien vessels moved in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming with unknown metals. "They're beautiful," whispered Engineer Choi Bo-ra, the youngest member of the crew. She designed the weapons systems that kept their small ships safe. At least, she hoped they would keep them safe. The beauty didn't last long. Bright beams of energy shot out from the alien ships, wrapping around Kim's vessel like invisible ropes. The human ship stopped moving instantly, pulled toward the largest alien craft. "They're bringing us in," Kim announced to his crew, trying to keep his voice calm. "Remember your training. We represent all of humanity today." The alien ship's cargo bay was enormous. Kim's entire vessel fit inside like a toy. Strange lights pulsed along the walls, and the air tasted different when they opened their doors. Sweet, but with an odd burning smell. Creatures waited for them. They stood on 4 legs instead of 2, with long necks that bent in impossible ways. Their skin looked like smooth stone, changing colors as they moved. Some had extra arms growing from their backs. Others had eyes that glowed like tiny suns. Dr. Park Soo-jin stepped forward first, her hands raised to show she carried no weapons. She had studied every theory about first contact, but none of them prepared her for this moment. The lead alien spoke without moving its mouth. The words appeared directly in their minds, cold and sharp like ice water. "Primitive bipeds detected. Category unknown. Begin standard evaluation protocol." More aliens surrounded the humans, carrying devices that hummed and clicked. They pointed these tools at Kim and his crew, scanning them like objects in a store. "We are explorers from the planet Earth," Dr. Park said out loud, hoping they could understand. "We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship." The lead alien's eyes flickered between different colors. Bipeds attempt communication, crude vocal methods detected, no psionic capabilities present, mark for detailed study. Kim didn't like the sound of that, but he kept quiet. The aliens led them through corridors filled with even stranger creatures. Some floated in the air without wings, others had too many teeth. A few looked almost like humans, but with skin that moved like liquid. They reached a large room filled with floating platforms and screens showing star maps. Dozens of different alien species worked at various stations, all following orders from creatures that looked like the ones who captured them. "Behold the assembly," the lead alien announced, its mental voice filled with pride. 10,000 cycles of perfect order, 1,000 species united under proper guidance. The galaxy knows peace because we maintain control. Dr. Park studied the star maps while trying not to stare. The aliens controlled territory so vast that human numbers couldn't measure it. Thousands of star systems, millions of worlds, all marked with the same symbol. "Where does humanity fit in this assembly?" she asked carefully. "Fit?" The alien's neck twisted to look at her directly. "Primitive species do not fit. They serve or they are removed. The assembly determines which path is most efficient." Engineer Choi Bo-Ra stepped closer to Kim and whispered, "Captain, look at their technology. Everything runs on biological systems. Living ships, organic computers. I've never seen anything like it." Kim nodded, filing away the information. If they survived this encounter, Earth would need every detail they could gather. The aliens separated, the humans into different rooms for individual questioning. Dr. Park found herself facing a creature that looked like a giant insect made of crystal. Its questions came fast and sharp, probing her knowledge of human science, culture, and military capabilities. "Your species lacks mental communication abilities," the creature observed. "You cannot share thoughts directly. How do you coordinate large groups without proper neural linking?" "We use spoken language, written words, and electronic communication," Dr. Park explained. "It works well for us." "Inefficient, crude. Your mathematics are simple, your physics incomplete. Your weapons technology is barely adequate for planetary defense." The crystal insect made notes on a device that grew from its arm like a living tool. Conclusion: Category 7 status recommended. What does Category 7 mean? Expendable resource classification. Species suitable for basic labor or biomass conversion. No significant value for preservation. Dr. Park's blood went cold. The aliens weren't just studying humanity out of curiosity. They were deciding whether humans deserved to live. In another room, Captain Kim faced questions about Earth's military forces. He answered honestly about humanity's weapons and defenses, knowing that lies would be easily detected. The alien questioning him had skin like flowing water and eyes that saw deep into his thoughts. "Your planet maintains multiple military organizations," the alien noted. "No unified command structure. Internal conflicts common. This explains the primitive development level." "We're working toward unity," Kim said. "Humanity is still young. Compared to the assembly, age is not relevant. Efficiency is relevant. Your species demonstrates chaos where order should exist. The assembly brings proper structure to disorganized worlds." Captain Kim began to understand that the assembly saw diversity and independence as problems to be solved. Their perfect order came from forcing everyone to think and act the same way. Engineer Choi Bo-Ra's interrogation focused on human technology. The alien examining her looked like a walking tree with too many branches, each one ending in a different type of sensor. "Show us your fastest computation methods," it demanded. Choi demonstrated her portable computer, explaining how humans built electronic devices to process information. The tree alien examined the device with obvious disappointment. "Silicon-based, computation only, no biological integration, no neural interface capability, primitive beyond standard classifications." "But it works," Choi pointed out. "We've built ships that can travel between stars." "Barely functional star travel. Your vessel required 17 cycles to reach this location from your origin point. Assembly ships complete the same journey in 3 cycles." The interrogations continued for hours. Each human learned more about the assembly's vast power and their own species' apparent inadequacy. The aliens controlled technology that made human science look like stone tools. They commanded fleets that could destroy entire star systems. Most frightening of all, they had done this before to thousands of other species. When the humans were brought back together, Dr. Park shared what she had learned in whispered conversations. "They're not evil," she explained quietly. "They genuinely believe they're bringing order to chaos. But their order means the end of human independence." "How long do we have?" Kim asked. "1 solar cycle. They're sending an evaluation fleet to Earth to determine our final classification." Engineer Choi Bo-Ra looked grim. "Captain, if their technology is as advanced as they claim, Earth doesn't stand a chance in a direct fight." Kim stared out through the transparent wall of their holding area at the alien ships moving in perfect formation. Somewhere beyond those vessels lay Earth, unaware that its fate hung in the balance. "Then we better make sure Earth is ready for them," he said quietly. And we better find a way to get this information home. The assembly had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had never encountered a species like humanity before. Neither side knew what was coming next. Admiral Han Do-woo stood in the command center deep beneath Seoul, staring at screens filled with bad news. 3 weeks had passed since Earth lost contact with Captain Kim's exploration mission. Now strange signals were appearing at the edge of the solar system. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," reported the communications officer. "It's weak, but it's definitely from Captain Kim's ship." Han's heart jumped. "Put it through immediately." Dr. Park Soo-jin's voice crackled through. The speakers broken and faint. "Earth Command, this is urgent. Hostile aliens. Vast empire called the Assembly. Coming to evaluate humanity. 1 solar cycle, maybe less." The transmission cut to static. Han ordered the technicians to clean up the signal, but they could only recover fragments. Words like Category 7, expendable, and subjugation fleet made everyone in the command center nervous. "Get me every military leader on the planet," Han ordered. "Emergency meeting in 1 hour." While admirals and generals gathered from around the world, engineer Choi Bo-ra's voice came through in another transmission fragment. This one contained technical data that made the scientists very excited and very worried at the same time. Biotechnology. Ships are alive. Electromagnetic vulnerability. Neural networks control everything. If we can disrupt the frequency. Dr. Nam Jun-ho, Earth's best physicist, studied the data with growing amazement. He had never seen technology that mixed biology and engineering so completely. The alien ships weren't just built, they were grown. "This changes everything we know about space travel," he told his research team. "Their vessels are essentially giant living creatures with metal skeletons. The neural networks that control them use electrical signals just like human brains." "Can we use that against them?" asked his assistant. "Maybe. If we can find the right electromagnetic frequency, we might be able to confuse their ship brains. Make them forget how to fly." Admiral Han gathered Earth's military leaders in a secure conference room. Faces appeared on screens from every continent as he shared what little they knew about the coming threat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face the greatest challenge in human history. An alien empire with technology far beyond ours is sending ships to judge whether humanity deserves to survive." General Martinez from the Americas asked, "What are our options?" "We fight, we hide, or we surrender," Han replied. "Hiding is impossible. They already know where we are. Surrender means the end of human independence. That leaves fighting. Against superior technology? That's suicide," protested Admiral Chen from the Pacific Fleet. "Maybe, but we have advantages they don't expect. Dr. Nam's team is working on weapons that might level the playing field." While the military leaders argued, Ambassador Lee Min-ki worked on a different approach. If the Assembly controlled other species, perhaps some of those species weren't happy about it. The transmission fragments mentioned internal conflicts and resistance movements. Lee studied every piece of data from the alien ship, looking for clues about the Assembly's political structure. What he found gave him hope. The aliens spoke about maintaining order and suppressing rebellions. That meant not everyone in their empire was loyal. "We need to reach out to their enemies," Lee told Han after the military meeting ended. "If there are rebels inside Assembly territory, they might help us." "How do we contact aliens we've never met?" Han asked. "The same way we're trying to contact our own people. Radio signals, light patterns, mathematical sequences. Someone out there might be listening." Engineer Choi Bo-ra's research team worked around the clock to understand the alien technology. The transmission data included detailed scans of Assembly, ship systems. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The alien vessels were massive, some larger than cities. They traveled faster than light by folding space around them, using biological organs that generated incredible energy. Their weapons could destroy planets, and their shields seemed impenetrable. But Choi found something interesting in the technical details. The biological systems that made the ships so powerful also made them vulnerable. Every living thing had weaknesses. "Look at this," she showed her team, pointing to energy readings from the alien ship's neural network. "The frequency is very specific. All their biosystems operate on the same wavelength for coordination." "What happens if we jam that frequency?" asked her lead engineer. "Chaos. Their ship brains would lose connection with each other and with their central command systems, like cutting the nerves in a human body." The team began building experimental electromagnetic pulse devices, using every scrap of technology Earth possessed. They worked with car manufacturers to mass-produce components, with computer companies to design targeting systems, and with every university physics department to calculate the exact frequencies needed. Meanwhile, Ambassador Lee's communication attempts were getting results. Strange signals started arriving from deep space, encoded in mathematics and basic physics. Someone was answering humanity's calls for help. The messages were hard to understand, but the meaning became clear over several days of careful translation. Other species in assembly territory were indeed rebelling. They had been waiting for years for someone to successfully resist the aliens' expansion. "We are the Keth Mori," one message read. "The assembly destroyed our homeworld when we refused to surrender our independence. We have been fighting from hidden bases ever since. If your species can truly damage assembly ships, we will provide assistance." More messages arrived from different rebel groups, species with names humans couldn't pronounce, all united by their hatred of assembly rule. They shared information about assembly fleet movements, weaknesses in their command structure, and places where humans might find allies. Dr. Park Soo-jin's voice came through in one final transmission fragment before her signal was lost completely. "Assembly evaluation fleet, 50 ships, heading for Earth, 2 weeks. They think we're helpless. Prove them wrong." Admiral Han looked at the assembled evidence. Alien technology analysis, rebel communications, and Earth's hastily prepared defenses. It wasn't much, but it was more than any species had ever managed against the assembly. "We have 2 weeks to prepare for the most important battle in human history," he announced to the Global Defense Council. "Our enemies think we're primitive and helpless. Let's prove them wrong." Engineer Choi's electromagnetic pulse weapons were ready for testing. The first prototype was mounted on a modified satellite and fired at a decommissioned space station. The results exceeded all expectations. The station's electronics fried instantly, and even the metal hull showed signs of electromagnetic damage. "If this works on assembly bioships," Choi reported to Han, "we might actually have a chance." Dr. Nam's team completed their analysis of assembly faster-than-light technology. By studying the transmission data, they figured out how to build a crude version of the alien space-folding drive. It was nowhere near as advanced as the assembly version, but it might allow human ships to escape if the battle went badly. "We can't outrun them," Nam explained, "but we can dodge better than they expect." Ambassador Lee's diplomatic team established regular communication with 5 different rebel groups inside assembly territory. They shared tactical information, promised mutual assistance, and began planning coordinated strikes against assembly targets. "If we can hurt the evaluation fleet," Lee explained to Han, "the rebels will hit assembly supply lines and communication centers simultaneously. They've been planning something like this for years." The 2 weeks passed quickly. Earth's defenses were pitiful compared to assembly technology, but they were cleverly designed and unexpected. Electromagnetic pulse satellites orbited the planet like invisible mines. Modified nuclear missiles carried frequency jammers instead of explosives. Even civilian ships were equipped with basic pulse weapons. Most importantly, humanity was no longer alone. Across the galaxy, rebel species prepared to strike at assembly targets when the evaluation fleet reached Earth. For the first time in 10,000 years, the aliens would face coordinated resistance. Admiral Han stood in his command, center as the final preparations were completed. Every ship, satellite, and ground-based weapon was ready. The rebel allies were in position throughout assembly space. Engineer Choi's pulse weapons were charged and targeted. "Sir," reported the sensor operator, "we're detecting spatial distortions, approaching the outer solar system. The assembly fleet is arriving." Han took a deep breath and opened communication channels to every human military unit on and around Earth. "This is Admiral Han to all defenders. The enemy has arrived. Remember, they expect us to surrender or die quickly. We're going to disappoint them." 50 assembly ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, their massive forms dark against the stars. They moved in perfect formation toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming technological superiority. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The humans had spent 2 weeks turning their home system into a trap. The assembly was about to learn that even primitive bipeds could be dangerous when they fought for their survival. Admiral Han watched the alien ships approach and smiled grimly. The assembly had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, but they had never faced humanity before. "Let's show them what humans can do," he said quietly, and gave the order to prepare for battle. High Enforcer Quindal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the screens. Earth looked peaceful and defenseless, just like hundreds of other worlds he had conquered for the assembly. This would be another routine subjugation. "Begin standard approach pattern," he commanded his crew. "Scan for military installations and population centers. Prepare the dominance displays." The 50 ships of his evaluation fleet moved toward Earth in perfect formation. Each vessel was the size of a human city, with living hulls that pulsed with biological energy, weapons that could crack planets charged to minimum power settings. The High Enforcer expected this to be over quickly. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "we're detecting unusual electromagnetic activity throughout the system, much higher than normal for a primitive civilization." Quindal's 4 eyes focused on the data streaming across his bioscreens. The energy readings were strange, but not threatening, probably just the crude technology the bipeds used for communication. "Maintain course. Begin broadcasting surrender demands." On Earth, Admiral Han watched the alien ships approach through his command center's main screen. The assembly vessels were even more impressive and terrifying than the intelligence reports had suggested. But Han had learned something important during his military career. Impressive didn't always mean unbeatable. "All units report ready, sir," announced his communications officer. "Electromagnetic pulse satellites armed and positioned," reported Engineer Choi from her weapons control station. "Rebel allies confirm they're in position throughout assembly space," added Ambassador Lee. Han took a deep breath. Humanity had one chance to prove they weren't helpless primitives. If this failed, Earth would join the thousands of worlds already under assembly control. "Wait for my signal," Han ordered. "Let them get close enough to feel confident." The assembly ships reached Earth's outer orbital zone and began their dominance display. Bright energy beams lanced out to vaporize several asteroids, showing the primitive bipeds what would happen to their cities if they resisted. It was standard procedure, designed to break the enemy's will to fight. High Enforcer Quindal smiled as he watched the demonstration. Fear was the assembly's most effective weapon. Species that surrendered quickly were usually allowed to survive as workers. Those that fought back were eliminated as examples to others. "Begin scanning their largest population centers," he commanded. "Prepare to demand immediate—" Alarms began screaming throughout his ship. The bioscreens flickered and went dark. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in pulsing red as backup systems struggled to function. "Report!" Quindal roared. "Sir, we're experiencing massive electromagnetic interference. Our neural networks are being disrupted." Around Earth, invisible, waves of electromagnetic energy pulsed out from hidden satellites. Engineer Choi had spent 2 weeks calculating the exact frequencies needed to disrupt assembly biotechnology. Her pulse weapons hit every alien ship simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Assembly vessels that had operated in perfect coordination for millennia suddenly lost connection with each other and their central command systems. Ship brains that controlled navigation, weapons, and life support began firing randomly as their neural pathways scrambled. "Now!" Admiral Han shouted into his communicator. "All units attack!" Human ships hidden behind the moon and in asteroid belts suddenly appeared, moving fast toward the confused alien vessels. They were tiny compared to the assembly ships, but they carried Engineer Choi's electromagnetic pulse weapons and the determination of a species fighting for survival. Captain Yu Da-eun led the first attack wave in her modified destroyer. She had been born on a space station and could pilot anything that flew. Her ship darted between the massive alien vessels like a wasp attacking elephants. "Target their sensor clusters," she ordered her weapons officer. "Let's see how well they fight when they're blind." Pulse beams lanced out from the human ship, striking the biological sensors along the assembly vessel's hull. The alien ship's ability to see and track targets flickered in and out as its biosensors overloaded. High Enforcer Quindal struggled to regain control of his fleet as chaos spread through the assembly ships. Half his vessels were drifting helplessly, their bio-brains too confused to maintain basic functions. The others fired wildly at targets they couldn't properly see. "How are primitive bipeds doing this?" he demanded of his science officer. "Sir, they're using focused electromagnetic pulses tuned to our neural frequencies. Someone gave them detailed knowledge of our biosystems." That was impossible. No species had ever successfully analyzed assembly technology while under capture. The bipeds shouldn't have been able to figure out how their ships worked, but the evidence was right in front of him. Human ships swarmed around his fleet like angry insects, striking with precision at the most vulnerable points of each vessel. They knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. Commander Yoon Da-eun's Special Forces team had trained for this moment using detailed intelligence from Dr. Park's transmissions. They approached the largest assembly ship in a modified transport, using electromagnetic camouflage to avoid detection. "Remember," Yoon told her soldiers as they prepared to board the alien vessel, "their technology is biological. Cut the nerve clusters, and their ship dies." The human boarding party used shaped charges to blast through the assembly ship's hull. They found themselves in corridors that pulsed like the inside of a living creature, with walls that bled when damaged and floors that moved underfoot. "This is nightmare fuel," muttered one of the soldiers as they fought through the ship's automatic defenses. "Focus on the mission," Yoon replied, leading them toward the ship's central nervous system. "Fear is just another enemy to defeat." The assembly crew they encountered were brave but unprepared for human tactics. They had fought rebellions before, but always against species that used similar biotechnology. The humans fought like machines, using explosive weapons and electromagnetic grenades that short-circuited everything they touched. Yoon's team reached the ship's bio-brain, a massive organ that pulsed with electrical activity in the center of the vessel. It looked like a giant heart made of living metal and crystal. "Plant the charges," Yoon ordered. "Let's give this thing a headache it won't forget." The electromagnetic explosives detonated in sequence, sending chaotic signals throughout the ship's nervous system. The vessel began spinning out of control as its bio-brain suffered the equivalent of a massive seizure. Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out as human forces used their knowledge of assembly weaknesses to devastating effect. Ships that had conquered thousands of worlds found themselves helpless against an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Scientist Nam Jun-ho monitored the battle from his laboratory, making real-time adjustments to the electromagnetic pulse frequencies. Every time the assembly ships tried to adapt, he changed the signal pattern to keep them confused. "Their bio-brains are more complex than we thought," he reported to Admiral Han. "But complexity makes them more vulnerable to disruption, not less." The tide of battle turned completely when the assembly ships began colliding with each other. Without proper coordination, the massive vessels couldn't maneuver safely in close formation. Two ships became entangled, their living hulls fusing, together in a grotesque accident. High Enforcer Quindal watched his invincible fleet destroy itself and felt something he had never experienced before: defeat. The primitive bipeds weren't just fighting back, they were winning. "Sir, we're receiving communications from rebel forces throughout assembly space," his communications officer reported with obvious fear. "They're attacking our supply lines and command centers simultaneously." That was the final piece of humanity's strategy. While the assembly focused on Earth, their enemies struck at targets throughout their empire. Rebel species that had been waiting for this opportunity launched coordinated attacks on assembly infrastructure. "This isn't possible," Quindal whispered. "How did primitives organize a galaxy-wide rebellion?" The answer came in a transmission from Ambassador Lee's diplomatic team. "Hi, Enforcer. This is Ambassador Lee Min-Ki representing Earth and our allies. Your empire has made too many enemies. Today, they all fight together." Admiral Han watched the battle statistics update on his screens. 30 assembly ships were disabled or destroyed. The remaining 20 were retreating in confusion, their crews unable to understand how they had been defeated by a supposedly primitive species. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we're receiving data transmissions from the damaged assembly vessels. Our teams managed to download their navigation computers and communication logs." Han smiled. Not only had humanity survived the assembly's evaluation, they had captured valuable intelligence about the enemy's territory, fleet movements, and command structure. Engineer Choi's weapons had worked even better than hoped. The electromagnetic pulse technology that disrupted assembly biosystems could be mass-produced and shared with rebel allies throughout the galaxy. "Begin recovery operations," Han ordered. "I want every piece of assembly technology we can salvage, and start manufacturing more pulse weapons. Something tells me we're going to need them." Overlord Vexathara stood before the Grand Assembly Council, his crystalline form crackling with barely controlled rage. For 10,000 years, no species had successfully resisted assembly evaluation. Now a single defeat threatened to unravel everything they had built. "Explain to me," he said, his psychic voice cutting through the council chamber like ice, "how 50 ships were destroyed by primitives who barely understand space travel." High Enforcer Quindal knelt in the center of the chamber, his forearms trembling. "My lord, the bipeds possessed detailed knowledge of our biosystems. They used electromagnetic weapons specifically designed to disrupt our neural networks. Impossible. No captured species has ever successfully analyzed our technology. Nevertheless, my lord, they knew exactly how our ships functioned. They struck with precision at our most vulnerable systems." Archon Mortennis, ancient beyond measure, shifted his massive bulk on the council platform. His voice carried the weight of millennia. "There is more troubling news, Overlord. Rebellions have erupted across 17 sectors. Species that have been docile for centuries are suddenly attacking our installations." The implications hit Vexathara like a physical blow. The human victory hadn't just damaged one fleet, it had inspired resistance throughout the galaxy. Species that had accepted assembly rule for generations were remembering what freedom meant. "Show me the reports," he commanded. Holographic displays filled the chamber with data from across assembly space. Red markers indicated rebel attacks, system failures, and communication blackouts. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Coordinated resistance on a scale never seen before. "The Keth Mori destroyed 3 mining stations in the outer spiral," reported the intelligence Archon. "The Veltaran Federation seized control of the Nexus Point in Sector 7. Even the docile Merkoth are sabotaging their own production facilities." Ambassador Lee Min-Ki's voice echoed through the chamber as communications officers played intercepted transmissions. "People of the galaxy, the assembly can be defeated. Earth has shown that their ships can be destroyed, their technology disrupted. The time for freedom has come." Overlord Vexathera felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia. Fear. Not for his own life, but for the survival of the order he had spent 10,000 years building. The Assembly wasn't just a government or military force, it was the foundation of galactic civilization. Mobilize the core fleets, he ordered. Every available ship, every loyal species. These primitives have no idea what they've started. On Earth, Admiral Han studied the intelligence data recovered from damaged assembly ships. The scope of the alien empire was staggering. Thousands of star systems, millions of worlds, billions of species, all controlled by a single authority. But the data also revealed something hopeful: cracks in the foundation. "Look at these rebellion reports," Dr. Park Soo-jin said, pointing to information displayed on the command center's main screen. She had been rescued from the assembly ship during the battle, along with Captain Kim and the rest of the captured crew. 17 different species have attacked assembly targets in the past week, she continued. They were waiting for someone to prove the assembly could be beaten. Captain Kim studied the star charts they had recovered. The assembly controls territory so vast that they can't respond to every threat simultaneously. If we can coordinate these rebellions, we can keep them off balance. Engineer Choi Bo-ra worked frantically to mass-produce electromagnetic pulse weapons based on her successful prototypes. Factories across Earth had been converted to manufacture the devices, while human ships carried them to rebel allies throughout the galaxy. The Keth Mori are requesting 50 pulse generators, she reported to Admiral Han. The Veltaran want technical specifications so they can build their own. Everyone wants the weapons that can stop assembly bioships. Ambassador Lee coordinated humanity's first interstellar diplomatic mission from a captured assembly vessel. The alien ship's communication systems allowed him to reach species across the galaxy, building the foundations of a true rebellion. "We're not trying to replace the assembly with human rule," he explained to a gathering of rebel leaders through quantum entanglement communicators. "We're offering something the galaxy hasn't seen in 10,000 years, a choice." The response was overwhelming. Species that had never heard of humanity pledged support for the rebellion. Some offered military assistance, others provided intelligence about assembly weaknesses, and a few shared technology that could help level the playing field. Dr. Nam Jun-ho studied the faster-than-light communication systems recovered from assembly ships. Human science was centuries behind in some areas, but they learned quickly when survival depended on it. Their quantum entanglement networks connect every major system in the galaxy, he explained to his research team. If we can access these networks, we can coordinate resistance movements in real time across impossible distances. The breakthrough came when they realized that assembly communication systems were biological, just like their ships. The same electromagnetic frequencies that disrupted vessel operations could be used to hack their communication networks. "We're not just jamming their signals," Nam reported excitedly to Admiral Han. "We're taking control of them. Every message the assembly sends can be intercepted, decoded, and replaced with our own." Within days, assembly commanders throughout the galaxy found themselves receiving conflicting orders, false intelligence reports, and propaganda messages from the rebellion. Their perfect communication network became a weapon turned against them. Commander Yoon Da-un led increasingly bold raids against assembly installations using intelligence gathered from their own communication systems. Her special forces teams struck shipping convoys, supply depots, and isolated command posts with surgical precision. "The key is staying mobile," she explained to rebel leaders during a strategy meeting held in hyperspace. "The assembly is used to fighting large fleets in open battle. Small, fast units using hit-and-run tactics confuse their command structure." Her methods were copied by rebel forces throughout the galaxy. Species that had never worked together began sharing tactical knowledge and coordinating attacks. The assembly's rigid hierarchy struggled to adapt to this new form of warfare. Overlord Vexathera watched his empire fragment as rebellion spread from system to system. Each victory by rebel forces inspired more species to join the resistance. The careful order built over millennia was collapsing faster than it could be repaired. "We need a decisive victory," he told the Grand Council. "Something to remind the galaxy why they fear us." "The core fleets are assembled," reported War Archon Zethka. 5,000 ships, our most advanced biotechnology, crew selected from the most loyal species. They can sterilize entire star systems if necessary. "Then send them to destroy the Bipeds' homeworld," Vexathera commanded. "Make Earth an example that will be remembered for the next 10,000 years." The order went out through assembly space, carried by quantum entanglement networks that the aliens didn't know were compromised. Within hours, Ambassador Lee was warning rebel forces about the massive fleet heading for Earth. 5,000 ships, Admiral Han repeated, staring at the intelligence report. "That's 100 times larger than the evaluation fleet we just defeated." "But our allies are ready too," Lee pointed out. "Rebel forces throughout the galaxy are prepared to launch coordinated strikes when the core fleet leaves assembly space. Engineer Choi had been working on something special for exactly this situation." "Admiral, we've been analyzing the biotechnology from captured assembly ships. I think I've found a way to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness." "Explain." "All assembly ships share genetic markers from the original bioorganisms used to grow them. They're essentially family members at the cellular level. If we can create a virus that targets those specific genetic sequences..." The implications were staggering. A biological weapon that could infect every assembly ship simultaneously, spreading through their living hulls like a disease. It would be poetic justice. The assembly's biotechnology used against itself. "How long do you need?" Han asked. 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if we want to be certain it works. You have 1 week. The core fleet will be here in 10 days. As engineer, Choi's team raced to develop their biological weapon. Rebel forces throughout the galaxy prepared for the largest coordinated attack in galactic history. The assembly had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. Now they would learn what happened when an entire galaxy decided to fight back. Dr. Park Soo-jin worked with xenobiologists from a dozen species to understand assembly biotechnology at the molecular level. Each species contributed knowledge from their own encounters with the aliens, building a complete picture of how their ships and weapons functioned. "It's elegant and terrible," she observed, studying genetic sequences that had been preserved for 10,000 years. "They've created perfect biological machines, but perfection can be fragile." Captain Kim coordinated with rebel fleet commanders to plan the ultimate gamble. While the Assembly's core fleet attacked Earth, every resistance cell in the galaxy would strike simultaneously at Assembly infrastructure. Win or lose, the battle for Earth would determine the future of galactic civilization. Captain Kim Tae-ho piloted his captured assembly ship through the dark space between star systems, carrying a cargo that could change the course of the Galactic War. In his ship's hold were electromagnetic pulse weapons, communication devices, and most importantly, samples of Engineer Choi's biological weapon. His destination was a hidden rebel base in the Keth-Mori asteroid belt, where representatives from dozens of species were gathering to coordinate the largest resistance operation in galactic history. The Assembly's core fleet was still 8 days from Earth, but the rebels were already moving. Approaching the rendezvous. "Point," reported his navigator, a rescued human scientist named Dr. Yang. "I'm seeing ships from at least 20 different species." Kim studied the vessels gathered around the asteroid base. Some looked like living creatures with metallic skeletons. Others appeared to be grown from crystal or shaped from liquid metal. A few resembled human ships, but with strange modifications that hurt to look at directly. "Remember," Kim told his crew as they docked, "we're all fighting the same enemy, but we don't all fight the same way. Stay alert and keep an open mind." The interior of the rebel base was a maze of interconnected chambers carved from solid rock. Different species had modified sections to match their environmental needs, creating zones with various atmospheres, gravity levels, and lighting conditions. Kim found himself in a vast central chamber where rebel leaders from across the galaxy had gathered. The sight was both inspiring and overwhelming. Creatures he couldn't have imagined stood beside beings that looked almost human, all united by their determination to end assembly rule. The Kethmori commander was a tall, graceful being with skin, like polished stone and eyes that glowed with inner fire. She spoke in harmonious tones that translated into perfect human language through advanced communication devices. Captain Kim, your species has given the galaxy something precious, hope. For too long, we believed the assembly was invincible. Your victory at Earth proved otherwise. We couldn't have won without intelligence from rebel allies, Kim replied. This fight belongs to all of us. A creature that looked like a walking tree with crystalline bark stepped forward. This was a Veltaran representative, speaking for the species that controlled several important star systems in assembly space. The electromagnetic weapons your engineer Choi designed have been distributed to 17 rebel fleets, the tree being reported. Our manufacturing facilities have produced over 2,000 pulse generators in the past week. What about the biological weapon? Asked a being that appeared to be made of living water, its form constantly shifting and flowing. Kim hesitated. Engineer Choi's virus was their most powerful weapon, but also their most dangerous. It could potentially infect every assembly ship in the galaxy simultaneously, but the moral implications were staggering. The weapon is ready, Kim said carefully. But using it means declaring total war on the assembly. There will be no going back. The assembled rebel leaders exchanged glances that transcended species boundaries. They had all suffered under assembly rule for generations. Their homeworlds had been conquered, their cultures suppressed, their people enslaved or eliminated. The choice was clear. The assembly gave us total war first, declared the Kethmori commander. They destroyed our homeworld when we refused to surrender. They eliminated entire species who resisted their expansion. We seek justice, not genocide, but we will use every weapon necessary to achieve freedom. Back on Earth, Engineer Choi worked frantically to perfect her biological weapon, while assembly intelligence networks reported the movement of the core fleet toward the solar system. The massive force was still 7 days away, but their approach was causing panic in some circles and grim determination in others. The virus is ready for deployment, she reported to Admiral Han during an emergency briefing. But I need to explain exactly what it will do. Admiral Han gathered his senior staff in the deepest, secure chamber beneath Seoul. Present were Dr. Park Soo-jin, scientist Nam Jun-ho, Ambassador Lee Min-ki, and Commander Yoon Da-yoon, along with military leaders from every nation on Earth. The biological weapon targets genetic sequences that are common to all assembly bioships, Choi explained, using holographic displays to show the virus's structure and function. It spreads through their living hulls like an infection, disrupting the neural pathways that control ship functions. Will it kill the crews? Asked Dr. Park. Not directly. The virus only affects the ship organisms themselves. But when a bioship dies, the crew usually dies with it unless they can evacuate quickly. Ambassador Lee studied the tactical implications. How fast does it spread? Once introduced to a single ship, the virus propagates through any physical contact between vessels. Assembly ships often link together for resource sharing and communication. The infection could spread through an entire fleet within hours. And from fleet to fleet? Asked Admiral Han. Assembly ships dock at space stations and shipyards throughout their territory. The virus could theoretically reach every bioship in the galaxy within weeks. The room fell silent as everyone considered the magnitude of what they were discussing. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a potential extinction event for assembly technology and everyone who depended on it. How many people are we talking? About? Admiral Han asked quietly. Dr. Park consulted data recovered from assembly computers. Billions. The assembly uses bioships for everything: transportation, communication, resource extraction, life support for space stations. If all their ships die simultaneously, billions of people could be stranded on dead worlds or in failing space habitats, finished Nam Jun-ho. including species that are loyal to the assembly by choice, not force. The moral weight was crushing. Using the biological weapon might free the galaxy from assembly tyranny, but it could also cause a humanitarian catastrophe on an unprecedented scale. Is there a way to make it less comprehensive? Asked Commander Yoon. Engineer Choi shook her head. The genetic markers are too consistent across all assembly biotechnology. I can't make the virus selective about which ships it infects. Ambassador Lee had been monitoring communications from rebel forces throughout the galaxy. Our allies are aware of the risks, he reported. Many of them have been preparing for the possibility that assembly infrastructure might collapse. They're organizing rescue operations and resource distribution networks. But it won't be enough, Dr. Park said bluntly. Even with the best preparations, millions will die when their life support systems fail. Admiral Han stared at the tactical displays showing the approaching core fleet. 5,000 ships carrying enough firepower to sterilize Earth and every human colony. Against that threat, conventional weapons seemed pathetically inadequate. What are our alternatives? He asked. Fight. With conventional weapons and lose, said Commander Yoon. The core fleet is too large for our electromagnetic pulse weapons to handle alone. Surrender and hope the assembly shows mercy, added Dr. Park, though their history suggests they won't. Run and abandon Earth to its fate, finished Nam Jun-ho. Leave our homeworld to be destroyed as an example to other potential rebels. None of the alternatives were acceptable. Humanity had started this war by refusing to accept assembly domination. They couldn't abandon that principle now, even when the stakes had grown beyond anything they had imagined. There's another option, Ambassador Lee said quietly. We could warn the assembly about the biological weapon. Offer to use it only as a last resort if they agree to negotiate. They'll never believe we have such a weapon, protested Engineer Choi. And even if they do, it gives them time to develop countermeasures. Or they might decide that destroying Earth isn't worth the risk of galactic plague, Lee replied. The assembly values order and stability above everything else. The threat of chaos might be more effective than actual violence. Admiral Han considered the options while watching real-time reports from rebel forces across the galaxy. Everywhere, species that had been oppressed for generations were rising up against their assembly overlords. The revolution that started at Earth was spreading beyond anyone's ability to control. The rebels are already committed, he said finally. If we don't use the biological weapon, they'll be crushed when the assembly mobilizes its full strength. This might be the only chance any of us have. Dr. Park studied the moral calculus from every angle she could imagine. We're talking about the survival of free will in the galaxy. If the assembly wins, they'll ensure that no species ever successfully rebels again. They'll tighten their control until even the possibility of resistance is eliminated. Against that, added Nam Jun-ho, we're weighing the lives of people who benefit from assembly order, including those who genuinely believe their system is beneficial. It was the oldest moral question in warfare. Whether the ends could justify the means, whether preventing future suffering justified causing immediate suffering, whether the survival of freedom was worth the cost in lives. Engineer Choi looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. The decision isn't just ours to make. This affects every species in the galaxy. We should give our allies the choice. The Assembly Corps fleet materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system like a dark storm cloud blotting out the stars. 5,000 bioships, each one larger than a human city, moved in perfect formation toward the small blue planet that had dared to challenge 10,000 years of galactic order. War Archon Zethka stood on the bridge of the flagship, a massive vessel grown from the genetic material of extinct star whales. His 8 arms worked at multiple control interfaces, while his primary consciousness directed the fleet's advance. "Begin the extinction protocol," he commanded. "This primitive world will serve as an example to every species in the galaxy. Rebellion, leads only to death. But the fleet's approach was being watched by more than just human defenders. Hidden throughout the outer solar system, rebel ships from dozens of species waited in electromagnetic camouflage fields. Captain Kim's vessel drifted among them, carrying Engineer Choi's biological weapon toward its target. "Core fleet is maintaining standard formation," Kim reported to Admiral Han through quantum entanglement communicators. "They're confident this will be a simple extermination operation." On Earth, Admiral Han coordinated the most complex military operation in human history. Not just the defense of their homeworld, but simultaneous strikes across the galaxy as rebel forces attacked assembly infrastructure. "Rebel fleets report ready in 47 star systems," announced Ambassador Lee from his position at the communications hub. "The moment we engage the core fleet, they'll hit assembly supply lines, command centers, and shipyards throughout their territory." Dr. Nam Jun-ho monitored the quantum entanglement networks that connected rebel forces across impossible distances. "All rebel commanders are standing by for the synchronized attack signal." Engineer Choi made final adjustments to the biological weapons deployment system. The virus was contained in specially designed delivery capsules that would penetrate assembly bioship hulls and begin the infection process. "Remember," she told Captain Kim through their private communication link, "you only need to hit one ship. The virus will spread to the rest of the fleet through normal contact protocols." Commander Yoon prepared her Special Forces teams for what might be humanity's last battle. "If the biological weapon fails, we fight conventionally. If we're going to lose, we make sure the assembly remembers the cost of destroying Earth." The core fleet reached the inner solar system and began deploying in attack formation. War Archon Zethka studied tactical displays showing Earth's defenses, scattered human ships, orbital installations, and the electromagnetic pulse satellites that had proved effective against the evaluation fleet. "Primitive weapons," he observed dismissively. "Destroy the satellites first, then commence planetary bombardment." But as the assembly ships moved into firing positions, something unexpected happened. Throughout their vast empire, rebel forces struck simultaneously at hundreds of targets. Space stations exploded, supply convoys were destroyed, and communication networks were severed as the galaxy-wide rebellion reached its peak. "Sir," called Zethka's communications officer, "we're receiving reports of attacks throughout assembly space. Every major installation in 17 sectors is under assault." The War Archon's confidence wavered. This wasn't the desperate last stand of a doomed species. This was a coordinated rebellion involving hundreds of star systems. The primitive. Bipeds had somehow organized half the galaxy against the assembly. "Continue the attack," he ordered. "Once Earth is destroyed, the rebellion will collapse." Admiral Han watched the assembly fleet approach and gave the signal that would change galactic history forever. "All units, commence Operation Starfall. May we be forgiven for what we're about to do." Throughout the galaxy, rebel fleets struck at assembly targets with weapons and tactics learned from humanity's first victory. Electromagnetic pulse generators disrupted bioship operations, while coordinated attacks overwhelmed assembly defenses. Captain Kim's ship accelerated toward the core fleet's flagship, using its captured assembly identification codes to avoid immediate detection. The biological weapon was ready for deployment, waiting for the perfect moment to begin the infection that would cripple the galaxy's most powerful military force. Approaching the flagship, Kim reported, preparing to deploy the virus. But War Archon Zethka had not survived 10,000 years of warfare by being careless. His ship's biosensors detected the approaching vessel and identified it as one of their own ships operating under suspicious circumstances. "Intercept that vessel," he commanded. "Something is wrong." Assembly patrol ships moved to surround Captain Kim's ship before he could reach the flagship. The captain found himself trapped between enemy vessels with nowhere to run. "They've detected us," he reported to Admiral Han. "I'm going to have to fight my way through." The battle for Earth began as Kim's ship engaged the assembly patrol vessels with electromagnetic pulse weapons. The brief firefight lit up space with energy beams and explosions as two technologies clashed above humanity's homeworld. Kim managed to destroy one patrol ship and damage another, but his vessel was heavily damaged in the exchange. Worse, the biological weapons deployment system had been hit and was leaking the viral agents into space. "The weapon is compromised," Engineer Choi reported with dismay as she monitored the situation from Earth. "The virus is dispersing harmlessly into vacuum instead of infecting the target ships." Admiral Han watched their ultimate weapon drift uselessly away from the assembly fleet and realized that humanity would have to fight the old-fashioned way, with courage, determination, and inferior technology against overwhelming odds. "All human forces, attack," he ordered. "Show them what we're made of." Human ships throughout the solar system dropped their camouflage and engaged the massive assembly fleet. Electromagnetic pulse weapons struck bioship hulls while conventional missiles targeted sensor clusters and weapon systems. The humans fought with desperate courage, knowing this might be their species' last battle. Commander Yoon led boarding parties against assembly vessels, using the chaotic battle conditions to get close enough to plant explosives on their living hulls. Her teams fought through alien corridors filled with hostile crew members and automated defenses, determined to cause as much damage as possible. "Plant the charges on the bio-brain," she shouted to her soldiers as they battled through a massive assembly cruiser. "If we can't poison their ships, we'll cut their nerves manually." Dr. Park Soo-jin coordinated rescue operations for damaged human ships while monitoring the battle's progress. The electromagnetic weapons were effective but not decisive. The assembly had adapted their bioships to resist frequency jamming, and their superior numbers were beginning to tell. "We're losing," she reported to Admiral Han with clinical honesty. "The core fleet is too large for our weapons to handle. They're adapting to our tactics faster than we can adjust." But even as the human defenses crumbled, reports from across the galaxy brought hope. Rebel forces were achieving victories throughout assembly space, destroying infrastructure and liberating oppressed worlds. "The Kethmori have taken control of the spiral arm shipyards," reported Ambassador Lee. "The Veltaran Federation has captured 3 assembly command centers. Even loyal species are beginning to question orders from high command. The rebellion was succeeding even as Earth faced destruction. The assembly's rigid control structure was collapsing under the strain of fighting coordinated resistance across thousands of light years." War Archon Zethka realized that destroying Earth would not end the rebellion. It would only make humanity into martyrs and inspire even greater resistance. But his orders were clear, and the assembly did not tolerate failure. "Begin planetary bombardment," he commanded. "End this world and its dangerous ideas." The massive bioships turned their weapons toward Earth's surface, preparing to sterilize the planet that had sparked galactic revolution. Energy built in living weapon organs as the assembly prepared to eliminate humanity once and for all. But Captain Kim was not finished. His damaged ship limped toward the core fleet's flagship, carrying one last desperate surprise. Engineer Choi had built more than just biological weapons. She had created a new type of electromagnetic pulse device that could overload bioship nervous systems permanently. "This is for every species the assembly has destroyed," Kim said, quietly as he activated the device and set his ship on a collision course with the flagship. The explosion that followed was visible from Earth's surface. Kim's ship struck the assembly flagship and detonated its experimental weapon, sending cascades of electromagnetic energy throughout the core fleet. One by one, the massive bioships began shutting down as their nervous systems overloaded. "Sir!" Zethka's sensor operator called out in panic. "The neural cascade is spreading through the fleet. Ships are losing all control functions." The War Archon watched his invincible armada drift helplessly as the electromagnetic cascade jumped from ship to ship through their shared bio-networks. Within minutes, 3,000 vessels were dead in space, their crews trapped aboard dying. "Creatures, retreat!" Zethka ordered the remaining ships. Fall back to assembly space immediately. Deep in the assembly's core territory, Overlord Vexathara stood before a massive organic computer that pulsed with the heartbeat of galactic civilization. The central neural nexus controlled every bioship, space station, and technological system. Across 10,000 worlds, it was the brain of the assembly empire, and it was dying. "Show me the damage reports," he commanded, his crystalline form crackling with desperate energy. Holographic displays filled the chamber with red warning indicators. Half the galaxy was in open rebellion. Supply lines were severed, communication, networks disrupted, and loyal species were beginning to question orders from high command. "The neural cascade from the Earth battle has infected our bio-networks," reported Chief Technician Yarmoth, her tentacles dancing nervously over control interfaces. "The human electromagnetic weapon created a virus in our ship brains. It's spreading through every vessel that makes contact with infected craft." Vexathara felt something close to panic. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had created a technological plague that was killing assembly bioships throughout the galaxy. Each infected vessel became a carrier, spreading the neural virus to others through routine docking procedures. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked. 7,000 confirmed destroyed, 15,000 more showing symptoms of neural degradation. The infection rate is accelerating. Ancient Archon Mortenus shifted his massive bulk, his voice heavy with the weight of millennia. "Perhaps the time has come to consider negotiation. The primitives have proven they can destroy us. Maybe we should discover if they will accept coexistence." "Negotiation?" Vexathara's psychic voice cut through the chamber like acid. "They have unleashed chaos across the galaxy. Order must be restored, whatever the cost." But even as the Overlord raged, reports continued to arrive from across assembly space. The rebellion was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Species that had been loyal for generations were joining the resistance, inspired by humanity's victories and the assembly's apparent weakness. On Earth, Dr. Park Soo-jin made a discovery that changed everything. While studying wreckage from the core fleet battle, she found something that explained why the assembly controlled so much territory with relatively few ships. "Admiral Han, you need to see this," she called from her laboratory. "I've been analyzing the bioship neural networks, and I found something incredible." Admiral Han joined her at a workstation displaying the internal structure of an assembly vessel. The ship's nervous system was more complex than anything in human science. But one feature stood out clearly. "Every assembly ship is connected to a central control network," Dr. Park explained. "They don't just communicate with each other. They're all linked to a single command system that coordinates their actions across the entire galaxy." "A hive mind?" Han asked. "More like a galactic brain with the ships as neurons. That's how they maintain perfect coordination across impossible distances. But it also means they have a single point of failure." Engineer Choi studied the data with growing excitement. "If we can locate this central control system and disrupt it, every assembly ship in the galaxy would lose coordination simultaneously. The neural cascade weapon we used at Earth proves their networks are vulnerable to electromagnetic disruption," added Dr. Nam Jun-ho. "But we'd need to find the central node first." Ambassador Lee had been monitoring communications from rebel forces throughout the galaxy. "Our allies might be able to help with that. Some of them have been inside assembly territory for centuries. They could have intelligence about important installations." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Commander Yoon's special forces had captured an assembly intelligence officer during a raid on a supply depot. Under questioning, the alien revealed the existence of the central neural nexus. "It's located in the assembly core worlds," the prisoner explained through translation devices. "Every bioship in the galaxy receives coordination signals from the nexus. Without it, the fleet becomes just individual vessels instead of a unified force." "Where exactly?" Yoon pressed. "Vexthara's throne world. The planet Morketh, in the heart of assembly space, the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Admiral Han studied star charts showing the route to assembly core territory." It was thousands of light years from Earth, through space controlled by hostile forces and defensive installations. It would be a suicide mission, he said bluntly. Even if we could fight our way to the core worlds, we'd never escape afterward. Not necessarily, Dr. Nam Jun-ho interjected. The neural cascade weapon proved that we can disrupt their bio-networks. If we hit the central nexus with a powerful enough electromagnetic pulse, every assembly ship in the galaxy would be affected simultaneously, including the ones defending the core worlds, added Engineer Choi. They'd lose coordination just like their fleet at Earth. Dr. Park raised a troubling question. What about the civilian populations on assembly worlds? If we shut down the central nexus, we're not just affecting military ships. We're disrupting life support systems, transportation networks, and communication. Grids across thousands of planets. The moral implications were staggering. The assembly's biotechnology wasn't just used for warfare, it was integrated into every aspect of their civilization. Destroying the central nexus could cause humanitarian disasters on an unprecedented scale. How many people would be affected? Admiral Han asked quietly. Billions, Dr. Park replied. Maybe hundreds of billions. Every world that depends on assembly biotechnology for basic survival. Ambassador Lee had been in contact with rebel leaders throughout the galaxy, discussing the possibility of attacking the central nexus. Their responses were mixed, but generally supportive. The Kethemori say they're willing to accept civilian casualties to end assembly rule, he reported. They've been preparing refugee camps and emergency supplies for months, expecting that the war might cause infrastructure collapse. What about species that are loyal to the assembly? Asked Dr. Park. Not everyone under their rule is oppressed. Some genuinely benefit from their system. Those species have been living off the suffering of others for 10,000 years, Commander Yoon said bluntly. Maybe it's time they experienced some hardship themselves. The debate continued for hours as humanity's leaders grappled with the most difficult decision in their species' history. They had the power to end the Assembly's reign and free the galaxy, but only at the cost of massive civilian suffering. Engineer Choi presented a possible compromise. What if we don't destroy the central nexus completely? We could design an electromagnetic weapon that temporarily disrupts the network instead of permanently damaging it. How temporarily? Han asked. Days, maybe weeks, long enough to break. Assembly military coordination, but not so long that life support systems fail permanently. Dr. Nam Jun-ho ran calculations on his quantum computers. A temporary disruption might work. It would give rebel forces time to seize control of assembly infrastructure before civilian casualties become catastrophic. And if the assembly regains control of the nexus? Dr. Park asked. Then we face the same choice again, Han replied, but at least we'll have given the galaxy a chance to choose its own future. The decision was made to attempt a surgical strike against the central neural nexus. A small fleet of the fastest ships would penetrate assembly core territory and deploy a specialized electromagnetic weapon designed to temporarily disrupt the Galactic Control Network. Captain Kim's sacrifice at Earth had not been in vain. The intelligence gathered from that battle was crucial to understanding assembly neural networks. Now humanity would risk everything on one final gamble to free the galaxy from 10,000 years of oppression. I'll lead the mission, volunteered Commander Yoon. My teams have the most experience with assembly technology. No, Admiral Han said firmly. This requires more than special forces. We need scientists, engineers, and diplomatic experts. I'll command the mission personally. Dr. Park immediately volunteered to join the expedition. You'll need someone who understands biotechnology if things go wrong. Engineer Choi was already designing the specialized weapon they would need. The electromagnetic disruptor will have to be incredibly precise. Too weak, and it won't affect the nexus. Too strong, and we risk permanent damage. Ambassador Lee coordinated with rebel forces to provide support and intelligence for the mission. Our allies will create diversions throughout assembly space to draw attention away from the core worlds. The final team was small but skilled. Admiral Han commanding, Dr. Park as science advisor, Engineer Choi as weapons specialist, Dr. Nam as technical support, and Commander Yoon leading security. They would travel in a captured assembly ship using fake identification codes to penetrate enemy territory. Remember, Han told his team as they prepared to depart, we're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for the right of every species in the galaxy to choose its own destiny. The small ship departed Earth under cover of a massive rebel offensive that drew assembly attention to the outer territories. While enemy forces rushed to contain rebellions in dozens of star systems, humanity's last gamble slipped quietly toward the heart of the Empire. Overlord Vexithara stood before the central neural nexus, watching status reports from across the galaxy. Admiral Han Dowu's captured assembly ship drifted through the outer defenses of Morketh, the assembly's throne world, using forged identification codes and the chaos of galactic rebellion to avoid detection. Around him, his small team prepared for what would either be humanity's greatest victory or their final defeat. Approaching the planet's defensive grid, reported Dr. Nam Jun-ho from the navigation station. I count over 1,000 Guardian ships in orbit. The throne world was a testament to assembly power, a planet-sized bioorganism covered in crystalline cities that pulsed with organic light. Massive space stations orbited like mechanical moons, connected to the surface by streams of living ships carrying supplies and information. There, Dr. Park Soo-jin pointed to a massive structure at the planet's north pole. That has to be the central neural nexus. Look at all the bioconduits leading to it. The nexus was enormous, a living mountain of organic technology that reached into space itself. Streams of energy flowed between it and thousands of communication arrays, carrying the signals that coordinated assembly forces across the galaxy. Engineer Choi made final adjustments to her electromagnetic disruptor weapon. The device is ready, but we'll need to get within a few kilometers of the nexus to ensure it works properly. That's going to be a problem, Commander Yoon observed, studying tactical displays. The nexus is surrounded by defensive installations. Guardian bioships patrol in overlapping patterns, and there are energy barriers that could detect any unauthorized approach. Ambassador Lee monitored communications from rebel forces throughout the galaxy. Our allies are launching their diversionary attacks now. Every assembly fleet commander is receiving reports of simultaneous rebellions in 50 star systems. As if responding to his words, alarms began sounding throughout the assembly fleet. Ships that had been patrolling in perfect formation suddenly broke away, racing toward distant star systems where rebel forces were attacking critical installations. It's working, Admiral Han said with grim satisfaction. The diversionary attacks are drawing defenders away from the core worlds. But Overlord Vexithara was not easily fooled. In his throne chamber deep within the neural nexus, he watched the pattern of attacks with growing suspicion. The rebellions were too coordinated, too perfectly timed to be coincidental. This is a diversion, he announced to his remaining advisors. The primitives are planning something here, at the heart of our empire. Impossible, protested War Archon Zethka, his form still bearing scars from the battle at Earth. No enemy has ever penetrated this far into assembly space. The humans have done many impossible things, Vexithara replied coldly. Double the guard around the neural nexus. Search every ship in the system. Admiral Han's team felt the increased security immediately. Guardian ships began broadcasting identification challenges, demanding detailed responses from every vessel in the system. Their forged codes might not hold up under close scrutiny. We need a distraction, Han decided. Something to focus their attention away from us. Commander Yoon had been studying the defensive patterns around the planet. Admiral, there's a weakness in their formation. The Guardian ships are bioorganisms, which means they're vulnerable to the same electromagnetic disruption we've used before. But we only have one disruptor weapon, Engineer Choi pointed out. If we use it on the Guardian ships, we won't have it for the main target. We don't need to destroy them, Yoon explained. Just confuse them long enough to reach the Nexus. Dr. Park worked quickly to modify their ship's communication array into a crude electromagnetic pulse transmitter. It wouldn't be as powerful as Choi's specialized weapon, but it might be enough to disrupt the Guardian ship's coordination. Ready, she reported. But this will definitely give away our position. Do it, Han ordered. The pulse erupted from there, ship like an invisible explosion, washing over the nearest Guardian vessels. Bioships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly began drifting aimlessly as their neural networks overloaded. Now, Han shouted, full speed toward the Nexus! Their ship accelerated through the confused Guardian fleet, using the chaos to mask their approach to the planetary surface. Behind them, assembly forces scrambled to understand what had happened and identify the source of the attack. Overlord. Vexathara felt the disruption through his psychic connection to the neural nexus. The sensation was like a sharp pain in his consciousness, followed by a momentary loss of contact with his Guardian fleet. Find them, he commanded. Whatever ship caused that disruption is our target. But the human ship was already diving toward the planet's surface, racing through the upper atmosphere toward the massive structure that controlled the galaxy's fate. Anti-aircraft defenses opened fire, sending streams of bioplasma into the sky. Dr. Nam piloted their ship through the defensive fire with desperate skill, using every trick he had learned from studying assembly technology. Their vessel shook, under near misses, but held together long enough to reach the Nexus perimeter. There! Engineer Choi pointed to a massive intake valve on the Nexus's surface. If we can get the disruptor inside the main structure, the effect will propagate through the entire network. Commander Yoon was already preparing for a combat insertion. My team can plant the device, but someone needs to stay with the ship. For extraction. No, Admiral Han said firmly. We go together. If this fails, none of us are leaving anyway. They crash-landed their damaged ship near the Nexus intake, using the wreckage as cover while they approached the massive organic structure. The neural nexus was even more impressive up close. A living mountain of biotechnology that pulsed with the heartbeat of galactic civilization. The intake leads directly to the central processing core, Dr. Park observed, studying sensor readings. The electromagnetic disruptor should affect every system from there. As they entered the Nexus through service corridors designed for maintenance organisms, the team found themselves inside the most important structure in the galaxy. Bioconduits carried information streams that sparkled like rivers of light, connecting to communication arrays that reached every corner of assembly space. It's beautiful, Dr. Park whispered, and terrifying. This single structure controls the lives of trillions of beings. They encountered minimal resistance as they made their way deeper into the Nexus. The Assembly had never imagined that enemies could penetrate this far into their core territory, and their security focused on external threats rather than infiltration. But Overlord Vexathara was tracking them through the Nexus's own sensory networks. Primitives in the sacred core, he snarled to his guards. Stop them at any cost. The final confrontation came in the central chamber, a vast space filled with organic computers that pulsed with galactic consciousness. Admiral Han's team found themselves face to face with Overlord Vexathara himself, his crystalline form towering above them like a living statue. You have come far, primitives, Vexathara said, his psychic voice echoing through their minds. But this is where your rebellion ends. The Assembly has maintained order for 10,000 years. We will not let chaos consume the galaxy. Your order was built on oppression, Han replied, standing firm despite the overwhelming presence of the ancient being. The galaxy doesn't want your peace if it means surrendering their freedom. Freedom? Vexathara's form crackled with energy. Freedom is chaos. We have seen what happens when species are left to their own devices. War, suffering, extinction, the Assembly prevents these tragedies. At the cost of choice, Dr. Park interjected. "You've created a prison and called it paradise." Engineer Choi was quietly working to activate the electromagnetic disruptor, while the others kept Vexathara's attention focused on the debate. The device hummed with building energy as it prepared to send a pulse through the entire neural nexus. "Even if you succeed," Vexathara continued, "what comes next? The galaxy will tear itself apart without central coordination. Billions will die in the chaos you create." "Maybe," Admiral Han admitted, "but they'll die as free beings, not as slaves to your vision of order." Ambassador Lee had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy. "Sir," he reported quietly, "rebel forces are ready. Species throughout assembly space are prepared to take control of local infrastructure when the nexus goes down." The preparation had been extensive. For months, rebel organizations had been quietly infiltrating assembly facilities, training personnel, and stockpiling supplies. When the central control network failed, they would be ready to maintain essential services and prevent humanitarian disasters. "The galaxy has chosen," Han told Vexathara. "Your empire is ending not because we destroyed it, but because people no longer want to live under your rule." Vexathara raised his massive arms, gathering psychic energy to crush the primitive beings who dared challenge his authority. But before he could strike, Engineer Choi's disruptor activated. The electromagnetic pulse propagated through the neural nexus like lightning through a nervous system. Every bioconduit, every organic computer, every communication array suddenly overloaded as chaotic signals replaced the ordered patterns that had controlled the galaxy for millennia. Vexathara screamed as his psychic connection to the galactic network was severed. For 10,000 years, he had been the central intelligence guiding assembly civilization.